development, promote green infrastructure, improve floodplain mapping, and avoiding construction on floodplains. Many recommendations AMO is asking for to adequately funding infrastructure programs, provincial support for robust prevention and response. Bill 108 was discussed, and I'll pass some information on to our planning department about that, and Indigenous relations throughout the province was discussed as well. And I think that's about all. There was other things, so but those are kind of some of the key highlights.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dodge. As well, we have the Facer Street Christmas Market coming up on December 7th. That's in the evening. I think it starts at 3 o'clock and goes until 8 o'clock. Councillor Williamson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in terms of the new information on the budget process, that we can't make amendments after the 11th, does that, through you to the clerk, does that conform with our procedural bylaw? I thought we could make amendments at any time.
I just, for clarity's sake, it's not that they can't be made. Amendments can definitely be brought the evening of. It's just that staff need the 24 hours to be able to prep them, so that's why we have the second budget night set aside over the last couple of years.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Okay, and then we also have a public meeting on December 9th, and this one's at the Meriton Lions Community Center, and that's regarding a proposal for the former Meriton High School. And I would just remind Council as well, on December 12th, we have the public meeting on the new community improvement plan, and that takes place at City Council chambers here at 6 p.m. All welcome. And on the planning one, just to remind Council, your role isn't to take a position on a proposed plan that's in front of us. If you're at a community event like that, your role is to listen. And again, under the Planning Act, if you're out there saying what your position is, when it comes to the actual decision-making time, which could be 3 months down the road, you could be compromising yourself by saying, I'm against this right away without even hearing any of the actual planning report coming in. So just be mindful that when you're out there, listen to what the residents are saying. But if you are out there also saying, I'm against this, I will fight this tooth and nail, what essentially is you're saying is you're not even willing to listen to the planning regulation, and then you could put yourself in jeopardy on a vote. That's all. So just be mindful when you're going to the community events. As well, as everyone heard last Friday, the Ombudsman issued its long-awaited report for the region in the hiring of the regional CAO and his contract extension. So this was a very thorough report, and I'm only bringing it to Council's attention because obviously the public is talking about this. It seems to be one of the most talked about subjects over the last 3 days. And as a member of this council, what we'll be looking at is some of the recommendations that came out of there. We'll look at our policies as well, just to make sure that if we can tighten up any of our policies. It's always important when you have an ombudsman report come out. It's not just native to what would be the region, but if local municipalities can learn from any of the processes in place, that'd be important as well. So we'll be asking staff to look at his recommendations and see if we have to update any of our policies. That's why I bring it up here as well. And with that, I'll look to the clerk and we can go on with the agenda.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This evening's agenda, the changes, one of two reasons to go in camera has been actually deferred. So it's a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land. So it's Realty File 8735. So that will not be in closed session this evening. Council Agenda Item 11.2, motion regarding 1 month appointments for the Deputy Mayor has been revised so that would state to start in 2021. Okay, so the full revised motion will be on the screen shortly. The following items have been added to Council's Sugar Sink folder prior to this evening's meeting: a memorandum from staff, Ontario electricity rebate, confidential memorandum from the clerk regarding citizen appointments on the Fallen Firefighters Memorial Task Force, and that's it.
Okay, so thank you, Bonnie. Is there any amendments to the Councillor Townsend?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm asking if we can go to 11.2 before we deal with 3.5 in general committee. And I'm not sure would that require a vote of council to make that change on the agenda.
Okay, so the request is 11.2 to be moved prior to the discussion on the appointment of the Deputy Mayor. So council has to vote on this. All in favor? Opposed? Pardon me?
You're not opposed.
Not on this one, not yet, not yet. If you were thinking about a conflict, it's not on this one. Okay, so that has been moved. Councillor Williamson, you have a delegation to add?
Yes, I'd like to add, Mr. Jane Hanlon to the speaking order as a delegation, please.
Okay, Jane Hanlon has been added as a speaking. All in favor of the addition of the speaker speaking to the tree canopy, the forestry issue, okay? Carried. Any other changes? Okay, can I have a mover and a seconder for the agenda? Councillor Sorrento, Councillor Kushner, all in favor? Carried. Any conflicts of interest tonight? And you can declare when an issue comes up. No conflicts currently. Adoption of the minutes. Councillor Harris, you're up for a regular meeting, November 18th.
By myself, seconded by Councillor Garcia, that council adopt the minutes of the meetings of council held on Monday, November 18th, 2019.
Any comments on the minutes? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Next one.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Garcia, that council adopt the minutes of the general committee meeting held on Monday, November 18th, 2019.
Okay, any comments on these minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Okay, we'll now resolve in the general committee and looking for motion to remove consent reports. Councillor Phillips.
Motion to move consent agenda, moved by myself. The council approve the consent agenda, save and accept those items brought forward for discussion forthwith.
Okay, I'll look to the clerk.
This evening's consent agenda, 2.1, Planning and Building Services, Code of Conduct for Building Officials, Policy Update. 2.2, Planning and Building Services, Application to remove holding designation from zoning, address 271 Merritt Street. 2.3, Financial Management Services Director, 2020 Proposed Operating Budget. 2.4, Financial Management Services Budget Standing Committee Report, meeting of October 28th. 2.5, Financial Management Services Budget Standing Committee Report, meeting of November 13th, 2019, and 2.6, Financial Management Services Budget Standing Committee Report, meeting of November 20th, 2019, as well 2.8, Legal and Clerk Services, Office of the City Clerk, Council Correspondence. Councillor Dodge.
Can I just ask one quick question? 2.2, does that refer back to one of the items that you withdrew tonight?
I'll look to planning. So there was a withdrawal, oh no, finance. Withdrawal of a in-camera?
Yeah, 2.2.
Are you talking about the consent agenda, Councillor? Sorry.
Yes, I am.
Okay, that
2.2.
was pulled, and then it was withdrawn. It was
Oh, so
told-
it's not in...
No, it's part
Okay.
of consent now.
Okay, yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
So do we have some Brock students at the back? Niagara College students at the back? Okay. Yeah, you'll be coming up forward to present shortly. Just want to welcome you here. And for the other folks here, what we just did was, there's a number of items that go on consent. Consent means that council has reviewed those files, they see nothing in them that they want to ask questions for, so they get passed as a block. And so we just went through 6 items that then they're passed as a bundle, okay? So council's reconvened. Public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act, there is none. We have a special presentation by E&Y, so Ernst & Young. And if I could have the presenters come forward and speak on... Yeah, sorry. Our CAO is going to speak to this first and then invite the speakers to come up.
Just as a little bit of introduction before the speakers arrive, as council is aware, we received grant funding from the province to perform an audit and accountability audit. Audit, redundant, but this was to help us to find opportunities to be more efficient, to modernize service delivery, and at the same time protecting frontline jobs. So the consultant that was successful to our RFP was E&Y, and they have worked diligently from September to November, very short time period, meeting with all of our directors and their direct reports. We scoped, as you're aware, we scoped the audit principally to be concerned with our new municipal works department, planning building services, EFES and CRCS, predominantly looking at large mobile workforces and ways in which we can be more efficient, and ways in which that whole reorganization organization of our corporation can be more effective. Not surprising, they found that looking at those opportunities, that some of the opportunities are also applicable to the whole corporation. So as they take us through just a very high level summary of the report, you will hear basically a number of transformational and operational opportunities that city staff will be working on in the next foreseeable future. So we have Mohamed, Bhamani, sorry, close, and Fahim Kaderdina. Okay. Kaderdina, oh my gosh.
Welcome to City Council.
Yeah, very close. My apologies.
So just identify yourself for the public again. Sure. So we have it on official record.
Oh, wow. I love this. This is great. My name is Mohamed Bhamani, and this is Fahim Kaderdina. And I'm an associate partner at Ernst & Young's government and public sector practice. Fahim is the senior manager in the practice. And we're here to give you a little bit of a background on the work that we have done. Was that the formality? Anything else? Okay, perfect.
Of course, I was just getting a cough drop, so I
Okay,
apologize.
no.
I will be paying attention.
Cough drop away. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come here and have this discussion with you today. I know you've all had a chance to take a look at the final report that we submitted. What I'm going to do over the next few minutes is just give you a brief overview on some of the components of it, and then we'll open it up to any questions that you have. It's thinking. So I'm just going to take you to some specific slides that we're going to be talking towards. Perfect. So just as a bit of an overview, the Audit and Accountability Fund was launched by the Ontario government in 2019 to give municipalities an opportunity to have to do third-party reviews to identify opportunities for greater efficiency, for modernization. Might not be pressing the right button. I'm getting there, I promise. Here we go. Almost. There we go. Still going the wrong way. I'll keep talking. To look for opportunities for modernizations and for efficiencies. So we joined the city in September to begin our review. It was really meant to be, it includes a high-level analysis of the city as a whole, but as the CAO had mentioned, that the focus was on expenditures, operations, and services of 4 departments, and that is planning and building services, municipal works, engineering facilities and environmental services, and community recreation and cultural services. What we found as we went through is that a number of the opportunities that we found go really across the entire corporation, and so we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Our approach was to gather as much data as we could, financial data, any types of reports, any previous audits, so on. We conducted a whole series of stakeholder interviews, multiple sessions with different parts of the organization, and we looked at some leading practices that are done around the country in other municipalities, work that we at EY have done. We have a lot of time and experience in the municipal sector to see what those opportunities are, and what we've been able to do is put those opportunities into succinct business cases. They've been categorized. If they can be quantified, we've done that, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And then we validated it with members of the senior leadership team, and that has resulted in the report that you have today. So there is obviously, if you've seen the report, it's dense. There's a lot of information and data. We're not going to go through every single slide that we had in here, but there are a couple of things that I wanted to draw your attention to in terms of what we found. If we look at revenue and expenditures across the city as a whole, tax revenues have grown by a compounded annual growth rate of about 3.6% between 2014 and 2019. Expenditures have grown at 3.1%. So while it is good that the growth of your revenues are essentially exceeding the growth of your expenditures, both are in fact exceeding your population growth rate. And so that will at some point not be sustainable over the longer term. The low growth rate is largely a result of a continued focus by the City of St. Catharines on actively managing expenditures while maintaining services. So what we found as we went through and talked to everybody in the organization and looked at the data is that you have a relatively lean organization, leaner than many of the other ones that we've had a chance to look at. And the approach that the city has made to expenditure management has been focused on managing that incremental demand through existing resources, and that has really pushed the capacity of existing resources. Just a couple of the other things that I draw your attention to is that while service levels, performance metrics, and other forms of measurement and information collection are common across divisions, they're not always explicitly shared, and they're not always explicitly managed directly as performance metrics. And so the need for that transparency being tied to citizen outcomes would be a leading practice that the city should consider. In a number of our interviews, we saw that there were challenges around some of the recruiting and retaining of staff, there's quite a component of the workforce here that relies on mobility to do its job, and that needs to be to an extent cultivated, because it has the ability to drive a lot of productivity in the work that we do. Okay. I will say that I did see full disclosure here. We noticed that it says 8 municipalities on that previous slide. We know it's 12, so we saw it. Don't worry, we'll fix that. I'm sorry.
I hope you're not foreshadowing something.
For shame, I know, for shame. The subsequent slides here go into some relative detail on each of the different areas. We're not going to necessarily go through that right now today, but I do want to talk about the opportunities that we have identified. So really, even though the focus was on PBS, municipal works, EFES, and CRCS, there were a lot of areas where we could see advantages for the entire city to focus on. And so we've put these business cases or these opportunities into 2 components. And here they are here. There's transformational opportunities, which broadly means they're initiatives that cut across divisional boundaries and will likely require a centralized approach and will have impacts beyond just the 4 in-scope departments. They're not as likely to immediately result in direct savings, but in the medium to long term, they will improve decision making. They will provide better support to SLT and to council, and better demonstrating the link between the services that you deliver and the outcomes that are experienced by your citizens. The other ones at the bottom of the screen there are operational opportunities. Now, these are the ones that are largely for the in-scope divisions, such as EFES and so on. These opportunities are contained to those divisions and are more likely to generate short, medium-term direct savings, cost avoidance, released capacity, or increased productivity. Okay, these are all laid out in the report that we have. Again, there's a lot and there's quite dense, so I'm not going to necessarily go through them right now, but I'm happy to take the questions that you will have. I will just jump down here. So there's obviously an explanation of each one of these in terms of what the current state, the opportunity, what the benefits are. I did want to talk a little bit about the engagement that we had with the SLT and the prioritization process. So something like this requires the buy-in and the participation of all the senior leaders within the organization. And so we had multiple touch points with SLT, and that included very early on to identify what opportunities they saw, what are the appropriate criteria that we might be thinking about when we're looking at different opportunities. We came back with those options to have them validated by SLT, and then we went through a prioritization exercise. These are the four that made it to the top of the prioritization for SLT in terms of what was important to them. That was to look at IT modernization. It was a focus on evidence-based decision-making. It's about making a modern workplace strategy. And on the more operational side was modernizing our building permit and inspections program. And we had an opportunity to also try and develop essentially a modernization program for the city. And this is how SLT has decided the prioritization and the interdependencies between making these different opportunities actually happen. It was an absolute pleasure to work with the team here. I will say the senior management team here and staff were 150% cooperative and came forward with all the data as required. We were here a lot. We were in front of your team a lot. They were unbelievably accommodating and really committed to having a good review that can really show some demonstrable results going forward. That's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation. Councillor Sorrento, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Bhamani. Could you just tell the public at home what efficiencies you found and any cost savings, just in general lay terms, if you could, sir, please?
Sure. So I'll say that when we talk about efficiencies, there's multiple ways to identify what efficiencies are, right? There is the immediate savings of actual cash. There is the avoidance of spending later on. There is the actual capture of capacity to be able to spend time on other things. And so a lot of the efficiencies that we found would relate, as I said earlier on, you're at capacity. You've really grown as a city very leanly here within City Hall. So the opportunity is to find better, more efficient, more productive ways to do things, to release that capacity, to focus it on other things. And on the slide we have here, we're looking a little bit at some of those opportunities. These focus a little bit more on the bottom 7. So digital service delivery, trying to have more services go online because they are generally cheaper to process than the ones that are done face-to-face. Process automation is, especially for our back office services, is an emerging opportunity at all municipalities. Fahim and I are doing this at 3 other municipalities, and that is a key theme for all back offices, is to stop, to the extent that we can, doing those transactional activities with individuals and allow them to focus on those value-added things and have those things go through an automation. It's looking at our infrastructure program, we're trying to rationalize our facilities and how we look at real property, looking to partnerships, and you have some good examples with the Meridian Center and the Canada Games Park on how you do that with other municipalities in the region, looking at your building permits and inspections areas to try and make that a little bit more efficient and more customer friendly, and looking at the Citizens First operating model as well.
Did you find some cost savings as well, Mr. Bhamani?
Well, again, not specifically in terms of a dollar savings. There are things you can do to prevent those costs from going up into the future and being more efficient.
Yeah, just one final question, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned something about, you mentioned the percentages. Our revenue is larger than our debt, and then you mentioned something about being unsustainable. Are you talking about revenue, or are you talking about a lean corporation? What were you referring to specifically about?
Sure. So when I mentioned that, the average annual growth rate over the last 5 years of your revenues is about 3.6%, right? The average annual growth rate of your expenditures is 3.1%. So it's good that your revenues are growing at a faster rate than your expenditures. However, both of those are at a rate higher than your population's actually growing. And so at some point, that's going to create more and more pressure on the services that you are creating.
So can you just explain what that means? Is it going to tie our hands to raise revenue, to raise taxes? Is it going to be does that mean diminished services? What does that mean?
I think what it means is that we need to build and create the capacity to be more productive so that we can handle that pressure, assuming that those expenditures and that revenue growth won't necessarily continue to keep in line with your population growth.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Through the mayor to you. You talked about outcome-based budgeting and other municipalities who do that, and there's a suggestion that we, I guess, move towards that. It's something I'm in favor of. Can you describe how a council could support the corporation moving towards outcome-based budgeting? What are the other things you've noticed in municipalities that work? to get there versus traditional based budgeting, which I think we've been doing for a long time.
Sure, and I'll look to our expert on outcomes-based budgeting, Fahim Kaderdina, to answer that.
So I think that's a great question, and the fact that somebody on council brought it up is a positive, because the number one thing I think that we found is it's buy-in from council. Because what it's going to require is a presentation of a different set of numbers and of budget documents that will show you, or try to show you, what you're getting in terms of services rather than what you're getting in terms of outputs. So rather than thinking about, we have this many people delivering X this many times, you move to a outcome-based view of what you're providing your citizens. So, council's buy-in is the single biggest factor for whether this can succeed or not. And then I would say the second one is it requires a broad consultation effort within the city, ideally with staff and with residents, to start talking about what is the kind of city that we want and how are we going to know when we realize that, what are the measures that we're going to take. And then that'll feed back to what you're tracking and how you're presenting it back to council and the public.
And my next question, I know you didn't get into specifics, but it seems to me that there will need to be some investment into IT in order to move forward. I know you probably don't have a dollar figure, but is this what we should be planning for and expecting? We often don't think about IT. They're kind of down in the corner somewhere, the people who fix our iPads, and we don't think too much about it. But is this something we need to think about in terms of the next year or two?
So yes, the short answer is a lot of these things are going to be really tough to realize without thinking about the investments that have to be made in technology. A couple of things I will say, though, is there's an opportunity to think about how you can do that in partnership with municipalities in the region specifically. When you think about things like asset management platforms and asset management plans, these are things that you can, it might not work out, but there's an opportunity to talk to neighboring municipalities about doing this in a coordinated way to see if there's an opportunity to drive down costs. The other thing that I would say about IT is, and I think you made the point well, it's more than just the people that fix their iPads when they're not working. It's really, increasingly, it's the backbone of the city and whether the city can function properly. So thinking about it from a strategic point of view and where the investments are going and trying to do it in a coordinated fashion across the city, I think will all be key. And all of that goes with, the necessity of upfront investment in the next, not even the next few years, just on an ongoing basis to keep up.
Thank you very much. It was excellent.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Kushner.
Yes, I have two questions. In your presentation, you used evidence-based decision-making. Where are we not doing that?
Well, I think what we found was when we are trying to determine what types of initiatives we're going to come forward with, whether to be council, areas of transformation, areas of investment, is that what we heard from staff was that there tends to be a very strong focus on the financial component of that and not necessarily on the benefit or the return side. And so it's really about having the strong rigor and the robustness of developing a plan that clearly identifies the opportunities that we are trying to gain out of our initiatives, backed by actual evidence, meaning as much data as you have that can show those previous trends and so on and so forth, any research that's there to show the actual return that comes back. And that is an emerging issue that we see at the provincial government. I have another large municipality in Canada where this is the exact same issue that we're talking about there. It's a very common one of having really robust thought process as to how we make our decisions.
So you're suggesting we look at value added from the expenditure, and my concern is a lot of the value added that we look at is social in addition to financial. So how do we quantify the social value? For example, in the near future, we'll be talking about keeping a golf course open, and our staff is saying financially that doesn't make sense, which is correct. But council looks at the social return from that. So how would you reconcile the two?
So I think that absolutely has a role to play with in this as well. There's no perfect way to say this is how you do evidence-based decision-making. I think as an SLT and as council, you need to come up with a bit of a framework as to what constitutes good evidence that is actually going to allow us to make that decision, and what constitutes return. So yes, sometimes it is quantified, sometimes it's not for just those exact reasons. It's not always a black and white thing, and so having a good framework that says these are the conditions by which we make our decisions, whether it be quantifiable or qualitative, are part of developing that approach.
Okay, can you be more specific? In the case of the golf course,
yep.
How can we quantify the return to our residents?
So, Councillor, in terms of, that's an issue that's going to be coming in front of Council in 2 weeks, and I don't think it's appropriate that you're trying to wedge it into today's discussion. I think you can ask them offline and ask them for a quantifiable, but trying to get them to say something that you're positioning, probably not appropriate.
But, Mr. Mayor, I'm looking at all types of investments. How do we quantify the social return? That's my question.
Sure.
An example I gave is the golf course.
Sure. I think that there are lots of different ways. I would think that there's an element of the economic impact that goes on beyond the golf course itself, is that the extent to which the city wants to be an employer and provide seasonal jobs, those are types of things that you can quantify to an extent, but those are also things that align to your strategy and what you want to be as a city. And those are the kinds of things that I would think about including from a social component. Do you have anything to add, or?
No, I would just say that I think the important thing about the evidence-based decision-making is you want to have a consistent way of looking at these things so that you can make the trade-offs in a more informed manner. So in a case like this, if you're talking about the social benefit of a golf course, you want to put some thought into how you measure that, and then how you would compare that to the social benefit of whatever other investments are in front of you as an option.
Okay, and the next question I ask is going back to the question that Councillor Sorrento asked. You've indicated that our revenues and our expenditures are growing faster than the population increase, and that's not sustainable, even though our revenues are greater than the cost expenditure. I would have thought it would be the reverse. If we didn't have the excess, then that wouldn't be sustainable, and you're saying the opposite.
Sorry, you can say. I think what we're trying to say is that is a unique scenario and is unlikely to last forever, and so that growth needs to be considered in light of the growth of the actual city. So we're not saying that there's an impending doom or anything, but it's a trend over the last 5 years, and it is unlikely to remain that way.
But you would agree it's a good trend?
I think you are less exposed to the risk at this moment. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kushner. So I'm either going to go around the horseshoe. So Councillor Miller, you had your hand up, and then we're going to keep going until we're finished this discussion. Councillor Miller, you're up.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation report. I'm really interested in the modern workplace strategy. I think you're bang on. That's a challenge for us with so many competitors in the marketplace for employees, that's somewhere we could actually, that maybe we're a bit behind, that we could get ahead. When you look at it in other municipalities or other organizations you've worked at, is that primarily strategic, or are we talking about more tangible changes to how workplaces are set up? They talk about desk bound in the report and things like that, or like how much of a balance between those things is spending and how much is sort of a change in thinking?
Please.
We have not rehearsed this. So it's a combination of the two, right? So I would say part of it is, getting a clear view of how you stack up compared to regional competitors, because the people you're looking to hire are not going to be working, beyond an hour's drive from here. So you really need to think about, are we competitive, and are we getting the number of people and the quality of people we should, considering we are the biggest municipality in this area. And then in terms of the more, I think you called it the strategic side, I think that is a big part of it, right? Because increasingly, people are looking for meaning in their work. And the one thing that municipalities and other governments have going for them is there's a lot of meaning in the work that gets done here. So being able to position that more effectively and communicate that more clearly is part of that strategy.
Thank you. And just could you, I suppose, give maybe a couple quick examples of what some of those strategy implementations that have been successful elsewhere in terms of modernizing the workplace?
So the provincial government has started to move towards, it's a flexible work environment, right? So what they do is they will hire people based on their skill and then deploy them throughout the organization depending on what a given division needs. And what that does is it's almost like a consulting model that gives your employees a bit of, it's both a bit of flexibility for the organization, so you can staff up in departments as needed, but it's an opportunity for the staff to get exposed to different areas of the organization to learn and to grow personally. So that's one that we've seen more and more municipalities moving towards and trying to deploy that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is an excellent report. Congratulations for that. It almost seems like a second strategic plan, and that concerns me. I don't know, as you're aware, we just completed our strategic plan. It's unfortunate this didn't come before a strategic plan, so we could have melded the two together. And hopefully that will happen.
Actually, it was in the report that it was melded together. If they want to speak on how they integrated their strategic plan into this.
That was my next question. Thank you, Mr.
There you go.
Great minds think alike.
So next slide, if you want to go to the next slide.
Can you indicate how you've melded this with our strategic plan?
I need to think back. Sorry?
I think you're going the wrong way. So while you find the slide, keep going. There you go.
This is how we have integrated the strategic plan.
Okay, thanks for that answer.
It's fully integrated.
I guess I didn't get to that page. The one question I have is, you've indicated that our staffing numbers for the size of the corporation are quite lean in numbers. You've indicated what needs to be done. Now we have to find out how it's going to be done. Our staff are working their fingers to the bone just to make the corporation run efficiently. Now this is to me a huge endeavor. Are you making suggestions as to how, you've indicated what, are you indicating or giving us suggestions as to how to implement this, or are you seeing or suggesting that they do it on their own, or are we going to need consultants to come aboard again to help us implement this?
Sure. So it'll be a combination of all those things. But I will say that we have provided the SLT with a report. So what you have here is a report. Right. What we've provided to them is far more detailed with a lot more of the specific steps that would have to be done to actually implement those.
Good.
So there is guidance that is there as to what those steps need to be. We work with SLT, as we had up there earlier, as to what the sequencing of those are, because some support some of the others. So they, as a team, have come together and developed what that plan would look like in some sort of modernization program going forward. And that does happen over a certain amount of time. There was 14 things we had listed there. We can't launch 14 things tomorrow. They have to build on each other, and that's going to be for SLT to work on and to bring forward to you on how they want to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Phillips, around the horseshoe. Anyone on this side? Councillor Garcia for the final comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenters. Following up on what Councillor Phillips said about, you said that the organization was relatively lean. You were talking in terms of numbers, but did you look at the organization itself in terms of efficiency when you mentioned the different departments? Did those departments make sense to you in terms of how they're separated or allocated, or is that something you looked at all?
So there is detailed findings that are in the report and that you might have read on some of the findings on each of the specific 4 departments that we looked at, because those were the 4 that we focused on. So there are some findings on what that might look like, and we spent a little bit more time with municipal works specifically. Can you just repeat the first part of your question there? I jumped to the second part.
Okay. Sorry, Mike.
Oh, the leanness. Yeah. So the analysis was more focused on the fact that your headcount has barely grown at all over the last 5 years. It's no more than 2 FTEs per year. However, you continue to grow your revenues and your expenditures and the amount of service that you are providing. So what we were saying is that they are operating in a way that's more and more lean, that they are being pushed to their capacity because of the amount of growth in the actual activity for the staffing that they have.
Correct, but the fact that we are lean in terms of the numbers doesn't mean that these people are being utilized the most efficient way. Is that correct?
Well, we're saying that there's ways to be more efficient, and those are the opportunities that we have, identified. So there is still manual, transactional activities that staff have to do in different parts of the city. We're suggesting you need to look at automation, you need to look at technology to be able to have them do less of that manual, more transactional things and spend more time on the value-added things that actually add value to your citizens.
You're saying, Mr. Mayor, that those more detailed recommendations are included in what you have submitted to staff?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the presenters? Okay, I would just like to say on behalf of the City of St. Catharines, thank you for the work that you've done. And in terms of just the overall organizational effectiveness, from your opinion, working with other municipalities, is that something that would be driven by the SLT team, or is that something where the sort of council would be the one that would be directing that?
I think it definitely has to be a combination of the two.
Okay.
I think SLT, I think they gathered around a table a number of times and said, this is really important to us, right? We've identified these transformational things, and they're big ones, they're really important ones, and so we know that we need to change how we do business in these different areas, and here are some operational areas, and we are going to talk about how to prioritize that, which means there's an element of accountability that they're taking to make sure that happens, but they need to work with council to make sure that that happens.
And so are you familiar with organizational effectiveness reviews? And have you done those previously?
I have, yes.
So is this something that is very comparable to an organizational effectiveness review?
What we've done here? Look, because the focus was only on certain components of the organization and not the entire organization, we've tried to identify areas that were pain points in those areas in scope, and through our interviews and the engagement that we had, we realized those were larger. We did not look at the organization as an absolute whole, which is what you would want to do if you did a full-on organizational effectiveness review.
Okay.
Probably want to get to the detail of doing activity analysis and so on and so forth. We did not have the scope or the time to be able to get into that level of detail.
Okay, could I have a motion to receive the presentation? Councillor Miller, Councillor Porter. All in favor? Carried. Councillor Porter, you have a motion?
I hope staff's okay with this. It was just to refer give staff time to review this in the first quarter and then bring it forward for discussion at the Budget Committee in the second quarter of 2020.
Okay. So that's a referral. Thank you very much for your presentation. That's a referral, so it goes back to council to staff for a report to come back in second quarter 2020. All in favor of that? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Porter. Okay, we now resolve into general committee, and councillors, you remain seated for the items for discussion. We have community recreation, culture services, business planning, and strategic services, tree planting program, and I'll look to Elise Norton first to come forward and provide some summary comments prior to a presentation by Niagara College students. Welcome, Elise.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, and members of the public. My name is Elise Norton, and I work for the Community Recreation and Culture Services Department here with the City of St. Catharines. This evening, I and we are here to present to you an educational video on the urban tree canopy and tree stewardship that was produced as a result of a partnership with Niagara College third-year film production students who I have with me here tonight. Staff intend to use this video on social media, the city's website, and as a tool for a future educational outreach program on the urban tree canopy and any other appropriate avenue for it to be shared. This video, along with the tree giveaway program, is part of an initiative to educate and assist residents with planting trees on private property and helping to really start the conversation that trees and a healthy tree canopy provide us so many benefits today, but also especially for our future generations. This is to further help us reach our target canopy goal of 30% by the year 2030. I would like to introduce to you a few of the students responsible for producing this video. This evening we have Courtney Kokorick, Stephen Osmond, and Jacob Graham. Absent from the group is Juliana Mancini and Victoria Weaver. Staff actually had to pitch our idea to these students against several other organizations, and they have chosen to work with us. The project began essentially on their first day of classes and ends this evening with the presentation of their hard work to staff and City Council. Through many meetings, emails, and edits, we'd like to present to you their final product.
They're singing, let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go. We're just queuing it up. Are you, Kyra, okay? So, Kyra's, it's loading. That's fine. If you want to, it's called fill in the dead space. Come on, come on, Elise. Let's talk about trees. Oh, we'll go to Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, so as Elise said, this is a partnership that we've struck with Niagara College. Council directed us to find better ways of doing what we do and how we do things. And one of the things that we decided on as a team was to look for a way to create something that we could share for future generations at zero or low cost. And so Elise and the team found the way, struck this partnership, and so we're really proud to show this to you today. The plan moving forward is to bring this to schools, as Elise described, and it's really the next step in the education piece of the tree management framework. So we hope you like it.
Okay. It's still loading, so we need another commercial.
There's two versions of this video. We have the longer version, 3.5, which you'll be 3.5 minutes, which you'll be viewing right now. But there's also a 30-second clip that we can roll on social media and our Instagram account and whatnot and use that way.
Okay, so to the students, why did you choose to do this project? If you want to come up to the mic. Time to shine, let's go.
Well, for me, I worked in the student program, the horticulture program, the last 2 summers, so I had a familiarity with Elise.
So you worked at the city as a student for the, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's the main thing for me.
Okay, look, I think we got takeoff. Not yet? Okay, so one of you, come on, tell us why you wanted to be inspired by this. Come on up. Now you got to come up in front of the mic to do this. Okay, fair enough. So, okay, Elise, did you read the book, The Meaning of Trees? Okay. Okay. This is fine. So, do we have anything on here? I can't even tell you jokes. I got nothing. My voice is gone today. Okay, so while they're calling this up, we could do the motion that's moved up by Councillor Townsend. So we'll have that motion by Councillor Townsend, and that's to have the Councillor Townsend, if you want to just say what your intention is.
I wanted to make an amendment to the motion 11.2. I just got to pull it up here quickly. Sorry, one second. In the motion, it does ask for council to consider appointing councillors on a 1-month basis. I'm hoping that we can consider, I know from what I understand, I think there are 3 or 4 individuals that have put their name forth for deputy mayor. 4. I think out of all fairness, I think I would like to put the motion forward to have all 4 of them split the 1-year term up for starting in 2020. Just out of all fairness, to give everyone an opportunity to take the seat in the role of deputy mayor. I think that it's the most fair way to do it, and I'm hoping council will support that change.
So it's an amendment saved by the music, but is something going to come up on the screen? There we go. Okay, Councillor, hold that thought.
Trees are just as important as the roads we drive on, the sidewalks we walk on, and the houses we live in. We need trees more than they need us, but now more than ever, the responsibility falls on you.
I'm Elise Orton. I'm the city's development horticultural technician with the City of St. Catharines. I've been with the city for about 10 years and in this capacity about 3 years. So I think the issue is that there's an education aspect of it, making people realize that they do have a responsibility to plant trees on private property, and then not just plant them but also care for them so we can add to the canopy. We try to offer things like the tree giveaway or incentive programs that assist residents with getting trees planted on private property, and really it's just getting everybody on board even from a young age and getting everybody to want to plant trees. So when we had the Emerald Ash Borer, we lost a ton of our canopy, which really set us back. So there's the issues that we have with invasive pests and diseases, but there's also the issues of just being urban trees. So issues like drought, pollution, salt from the roads in the wintertime. So our urban canopy does face a variety of issues, so caring for them, especially newly planted trees, is so crucial to their overall health and survival. The city does have a goal with tree planting every year. We are trying to reach 30% tree canopy by the year 2030. In order to do that, we need to be planting approximately 1,000 trees per year on our own property, but we also need to rely on residents to plant about 1,000 or more trees on private property as well. So another important piece to this is that within that, 80% of the canopy does sit on private property, 20% sits on public land. So while we can plant as many trees as we need to on the public portion, the private property residents is who we need to reach to really get that canopy to the target goal. So a healthy canopy, it reduces stormwater runoff. So when we have a really heavy rain, it's going to slow the rainfall down, which slows it into entering our sewer systems. And then also the root systems of the trees will soak up a lot of the water. So it alleviates the stress on our roads and our sidewalks and our sewers. It helps to cool our streets and cool our homes. So in the summertime, the tree canopy will have a cooling effect and reduce hydro costs in your home or in a building. And in the winter, it'll actually act as a windbreak, so it'll reduce heating costs as well.
The most important time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now.
Elise, well done. To the team, great job. Keep going.
So, just in conclusion, I'd like to thank Courtney, Stephen, and Jacob, as well as the rest of the group that was unable to make it this evening, as well as their professor, Bill Bolin, who really helped us guide us through this process. This was a zero-cost project, as Mr. Christie mentioned. Other than staff time, there were no other budget implications. And further, there are 2 versions of this video. There's the 30-second version as well. So thank you for allowing us to present this evening.
Well done, well done. Do we have any questions of the, okay, let's try and keep the questions to a reduced amount. I'll go Councillor Phillips first, and then Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not a question. I just want to indicate and congratulate Elise and her staff. I can remember when Councillor Elliott and I were on the Urban Forestry Master Plan Committee, and at that time our canopy was around 17 or 18%. And during that time, since then, we've gone through the ash borer catastrophe where we've knocked down thousands of trees, and now our canopy has gone from 18% prior to the ash borer, and we're probably down and up to, what are we now, 23, I think it was. So congratulations to our forestry staff. They've done a really, really good job. I'm hearing a lot of positives from our residents about the free tree giveaway. We need to do that again. And to the Niagara College students, you did a great job. Thank you.
Well said. Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Ms. Norton, how many trees do we give away a year, and how many do we plant on public property?
We give away approximately 1,000, and we also plant approximately 1,000. That's just through our regular tree planting program. That doesn't account even for volunteer groups or our Friends of groups or anything like that.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. Then motion to receive, Councillor Phillips, Councillor Garcia. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, and great work seeing Niagara College put this production together. They're an outstanding post-secondary institution in our community. Congratulations, and look forward to seeing you all grow in your careers. Thank you. Take care. Okay. So, yes. Ms. Jane Hanlon, can you come forward? You're the second speaker on this delegated list. Welcome, Ms. Hanlon.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to address you tonight. Yeah, okay. So it follows up on the tree canopy, and while we have great attention to adaptation, mitigation is being left behind. Many of you will know I haven't been to council to address you since I think about 2011. In fact, the last time I did a critique on this particular management plan. I've had a unique opportunity to immerse myself in all things relating to climate. Including urban forestry. And I also have been a member of the Ontario Urban Forest Committee. The climate research. For 13 years, I have focused on climate research, averaging half of every day. Part of that climate research has been the heat and drought tolerances of trees, their natural migration rates, how far they would spread from one year to the next of their own accord, and comparing that to climate scenarios. The UN has asked us recently to triple efforts. We are nearing 9 tipping points. 9. Those tipping points will accelerate the crisis. We have a buffer of less than 5 years to bring our carbon to net zero. I know the federal government is talking about 2050, and I know we're talking about beyond, but that's just talk. So the focus in 5 years means that it's this particular council that needs to make the difference. Now, the corporate climate adaptation plan is essential, but it's the declaration of climate emergency that is providing hope to the young people. The group meeting for the Green New Deal Niagara is also on tonight, hence them not being here. Adapting can divert us from solving the climate crisis, and it can also sap budgets. Adapting without mitigation is something that we can't afford to get wrong, it's not sustainable. It just sets up the next generation for not being able to adapt. And so here we are, following the 2011 plan with data provided from 2010 and tweaking it and finding budget-free items, low-hanging fruit. Absolutely great, let's do it. But I have some suggestions that I hope will be taken under consideration to increase the sustainability of our forest canopy. There are 15 of them, and I'll be quick. I hope it fits in that 5 minutes. I got 3:15 here. So I do not have 26 copies to hand out. We need to double the target. We need to reduce the timeline, at least in half. That 20-year target set in 2011, to not be there until 2030, and then we need to wait 40 years for those trees to grow, it's not going to work. We need to increase partnerships to include community groups, and then sustain strategic alliances to include the same. The community groups are there to take advantage of, to get the trees in the ground, but they're not there for continuing support. We need to install committees with term limits so that we can have young, vibrant people who want to get the job done. Thanks very much to the people who on the committees. God love them. They've been great. We have to move on. For affordability, we need to reduce tree caliper. Now, I know there was, oh geez, I'm at 4:50, and I'm just going to read them out to you. There we go. You have to work out why. So, utilizing volunteer plantings. Reduce space required between trees. A healthy forest isn't specimen trees. We need to include shrubs wherever possible. They improve soil, reduce compaction, protect the roots. We need to set in motion a new tree management plan, but don't wait for completion of it to begin here. We need to coordinate with gray infrastructure, roads and utilities for tree priority, not equal billing. We need less priority on tree inventory. It saps the budget and the staff. We need to increase priority of trees in the ground. We need to utilize bare root plantings, a bare root blitz for 3 weeks annually. It's a quarter of the cost per tree, and we have volunteers who would be happy to knock on doors to find locations to get those trees in. We need to increase species selection yet again, including fast-growing species. Biodiversity requires this, and we need faster shade. We need to increase watercourse buffer zones, remove requirement for parking lots to be paved. Seems off topic, but it's totally not. We need to include 30% Dutch white clover seed where planting grass. We need to keep bringing a tree bylaw forward until we actually get it through. And we need to treat this focus and this request on the urban forest canopy as though future generations are counting on you. And that's it. 5:43.
All right, thank you very much. If I may ask, if you can have an electronic version of that or a photocopy of it that...
I'd be happy to take a picture of it and send it to my favorite councillor.
I don't want to know who that is, but you can do that.
Well, he'll have to send it to you on the slide.
Councillor Garcia has a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question or no?
That's exactly what I was going to ask, if she could please email us that.
Yes.
All right. See, Councillor Williamson.
Okay, just to be short, so you're suggesting that we're not going far enough, we're not acting fast enough?
Oh, God, no.
Okay.
Not even close.
And just, you talked about adaptation and mitigation. I just wonder if you could flesh those out for us.
Adaptation is enabling the city and the responsibility of the city, like sewers, sidewalks, roads, some heat relief, some shade. But the next generations are counting on living here. We're not covering that part. That's not adapting. They won't be able to adapt unless we can mitigate.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the mitigation was in our strategic plan around climate change. We do have mitigation planning that's in place as well. Okay, is there any other questions of the presenter?
Yeah.
Councillor Porter.
Thank you. Can you just go, you said something about clover? Can you,
Yes.
Can you just describe the clover?
If we're going to be putting grass anywhere near trees, it ought to have something to feed it for the first several years. It's, 30% seed coverage won't be so much that it looks unsightly, but it will feed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Porter. Motion to receive presentation, Councillor Garcia, Councillor Dodge. All in favor? Carried?
Thank you.
Okay, so Now, I can have a motion for this 3.1. It's on the screen behind me. Who wants to make this motion? Councillor Cisco, seconded by Councillor Littleton. Question, Councillor Miller?
I'd just like to make an amendment that, hopefully friendly, that staff consider Ms. Hanlon's 15 recommendations.
Mr. Mayor, if we could actually, I mean, it's a friendly amendment, but if we could add on to that, and that staff take those recommendations and present budgetary impacts to the budget committee in the new year. I recognize that it's a long list. I'm not expecting it in the first quarter, but if it can be a part of a budget presentation in the new year.
In 2020, so it's not, okay. I
Yeah.
get what you're saying. Yep. Okay. Councillor Williamson and
Thank you. And since this dovetails into the climate change emergency and climate change issues in general, when are we going to get a report back on progress that we're making? Is there, and hopefully we're tightening timelines on this. Is this going to be an annual
so
piece?
I don't know if you looked at the agenda, but we do have a presentation on the climate change adaptation coordinator.
No, I know, but just on tree planting, are we going to get an annual report on how what progress we're making on this area, in this area?
So I would say let's wait for the coordinator's discussion on this, on climate, because that's her job is climate change adaptation. So let's wait for that at that point.
Thank you.
Okay. So call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Phillips. Yes. Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Harris. Yes. Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
Okay, now we have Engineering, Facilities, Environmental Services, and Miss Olivia Goff will be coming forward. Groff, sorry. Climate Change Adaptation Coordinator to present on this with the... Okay. Welcome. This is the first time presentation, so welcome to City Council. And again, just identify yourself for the public and you're off to the races.
Okay. So good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, City of St. Catharines staff. My name is Olivia Groff, and I am your Climate Change Adaptation Coordinator, so it's nice to finally get a chance to come out here. So let's just, so the agenda here tonight, I'm going to be doing a little bit of an overview of the corporate initiatives that have taken place to date, a small background on climate change, examples of climate change and the extreme weather events we've been facing here in St. Catharines and globally, as well as a little bit on the development of the adaptation plan itself. So as an overview of the corporate initiatives that have taken place, there has been a new strategic plan that specifically mentions climate change, which is great to see. St. Catharines declared a climate emergency on April 29th. And St. Catharines was actually 29th in declaring a climate emergency, and there have been approximately 470 cities that have declared a climate emergency to date. The first was actually in January by Vancouver. So in line with making sure that we're on track and we have things in mind, the main contributor to climate change are an increase in greenhouse gases and the conversion of forests to agriculture, which is why greenhouse gas reduction targets are so important. So back in 2017, the council actually endorsed a community target, and they fall quite closely in line with the corporate targets that were recently approved by council in October. And this really stemmed from the Energy Conservation Demand Management Plan. And to date, there has been a 25% reduction in greenhouse gas intensity, with the target being of 2030, which lines similar to the community target of 40% reduction. A partnership that was entered with the City of St. Catharines along with 6 other municipalities is Niagara Adapts, which is formed with Brock University. There was entered in a memorandum of understanding in August, and there was just a Niagara Adapts launch event that happened last week as well. So that was really kickstarting everything. These are the partnerships that are involved, and the goal of this project is really to make an walk us kind of basically through building an adaptation plan through planning and implementation. There is a community survey that is up on the City of St. Catharines website, where we're trying to get as many community participants to fill it out as much as possible. And there is an incentive of a $300 prize draw just in time, hopefully for some Christmas shopping. So the big kind of big definitions for climate change is mitigation and adaptation. So mitigation really is all about reducing the emissions that contribute to climate change. So things such as the LED upgrades that City of St. Catharines performed was a mitigation action. Trying to reduce our reliance on electric, or trying to rely more on electric vehicles and less on gas is another mitigation action. Adaptation actions are really about minimizing or preventing the negative impacts of climate change. So those can be things such as rain barrels, the tree giveaways, those will fall in line with the adaptation actions, as well as making sure that citizens are aware that we want the water to go where we want it to go, so cleaning ditches and catch basins is very important. Some global events that we have seen in this past year, there was Hurricane Dorian that happened in September. So not only from the devastation that it causes from the viewpoint of infrastructure, there's also mental health impacts as well, or the psychological impacts. And then it hit a little bit closer to home in Nova Scotia, and we saw a lot of infrastructure, not only hard infrastructure, but green infrastructure damaged as well. And so from all this, we can see it does hit the pocketbook. So the economic impact, there was a 2019 report which identifies Canada's physical infrastructure as one of the country's top climate change risks. So in the absence of adaptation and not preparing for the future, climate change will cost Canadian taxpayers between 21 and 43 billion annually by 2050. However, research shows that for every dollar invested in pre-disaster adaptation activities, up to $6 can be saved in post-disaster recovery spending. And that's by a pretty recent report, which is just in October. So to move towards kind of how we're experiencing things in St. Catharines, St. Catharines and Niagara has experienced 52 extreme weather warnings in the past 2 years, and that's in counting. Over the past weekend, we had freezing rain. We are seeing a rise in heat warnings issued for the Niagara region and St. Catharines. St. Catharines was swamped with basement flooding, which we saw this past summer, as well as cleanup from windstorms. So the windstorm that we had even on Halloween night, that was another recent storm event. So taking all this into effect, developing the adaptation plan is really where this is all going to come together. So an internal climate adaptation team has already been formed, and it's an interdepartmental team working across the various departments of the City of St. Catharines. And the role will be to assess the impacts, refine and adopt a corporate adaptation plan. And council approval will take place once a draft plan is actually complete. Another component to this actual plan is the communication and outreach component to it as well. So the goal being to increase climate literacy internally with staff across all departments and the community. So we're doing this both through internal city staff outlets as well as external to the public. So we do have, with the Niagara Adapts partnership that I talked about a little bit earlier, there has been a community engagement opportunity. So this was set up at the St. Catharines Farmer Market a couple Thursdays ago. We'll be there again next Thursday. And this is where we had a booth set up about water conservation. We had the computer set up where people could fill out the survey right then on the spot or take it home to fill out on their own time. And then as of November 22nd, we've had 303 surveys complete for St. Catharines. The goal through Niagara Adapts was to have 100 people participate in the survey. So we're already above that, which is great. So the next step for adaptation. Adaptation isn't an easy thing. Adaptation is going to cost. So the more we can prepare for it now, the better we will be in the end. So working through the next steps will be further work on the climate impacts, develop a climate policy, which we will seek council approval. The survey results for Niagara Adapts will be coming out in the new year, as well as we'll continue public feedback and comments, as well as the adaptation plan itself will seek council approval. So in conclusion, we have targets in place, a climate adaptation plan is in motion, and we have community support, which we have seen, and entering the new year with some great momentum for 2020 and making sure that we're ready for the steps ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for a very thorough presentation, and great job on your first presentation to council. So Olivia, you'll be taking a seat, or you want to stay up here? Okay. You don't want to be in the hot seat? Councillor Garcia, have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can we ask questions of the presenter?
Yeah, that's why she's sitting down over there.
So just, you mentioned, I think, that there were 52 extreme events in the past 2 years, and I was just wondering, how does that compare to previous history, do you know?
That wasn't actually something that I looked into. That will be something that I definitely can look into. I'm not sure how that impacts. Just from climate change, we've noticed that things are becoming more frequent and more severe. So that takes into account windstorms, freezing rain and all that, but not specifically.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would think that that is probably quite dramatic compared to what we've had in the past. The second question was, one of the communication objectives is the communicate to the public. Have you got any thoughts as to how to do that? Because that's a big challenge we have for everything we do, because years ago, as I always say, we had the paper, everybody read it. Now it's a question of website versus tax bill versus how do we let the public know about something like this?
So the survey itself has been a really good outlet that's not operated through the City of St. Catharines. Niagara DAPS is collecting all the information and they're going to assemble it for us, which is the great thing about the partnership. And we're going to just be trying to get out to like these community events that we're going to. The farmers market is providing a really good opportunity for us to engage with the public. The climate strikes, again, I've been going to those to kind of hear what's been said and on the ground. So there's just, we'll keep working through all the different areas that we possibly can.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Miller?
Actually, Councillor Garcia asked my question.
All right. Councillor Williamson, you had your hand up, then Councillor Phillips.
Yes, thank you. Just back to my question I asked earlier, in terms of timelines, we unanimously approved this climate change declaration last April, and now we're into the end of the year. When are we going to get reports back? And I just wonder if you could lay out. I mean, I like what I'm seeing. To be quite honest, I'm impressed. I just wonder what the timing is going to be like.
Yep. So for the climate change policy, we're really hoping to get that in place for the first quarter. And then for the adaptation plan itself, we're hoping for the third quarter. So by basically next fall, we'll have a draft plan for council's approval.
And we'll see some pragmatic actions like removing hard surfaces and those kinds of things that are tangible as well.
It will really depend on the actual plan itself, what it comes out with. So what those actions are, I can't comment on that right now, but hopefully it'll be a good one.
So you're going to be a regular fixture here. Thank you.
That's actually a good point, Councillor Williamson, is making sure that we have the allocation so that we have staff that are focused on this. We can't just declare a climate emergency and not have it on the corner of the staff's desk and us wishing that something gets done. So that's a great point. Great point. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In your organization, you indicated you have 7 municipalities presently as members. Where's the rest of Niagara? Have they been approached and not? Are they on their own, or what's the story with that?
So I'm not representing Brock University with the Niagara DAPS, but really how that all stemmed was from securing a grant to hire the climate change coordinator specifically. Some of those municipalities, I guess, didn't go after the funding, or they didn't have the angst to go for a climate change coordinator. There are 2 different streams. So there are municipalities that are going after a mitigation stream, and there are municipalities that are doing the adaptation stream, which the City of St. Catharines is. So there are a couple of municipalities that are just doing a little different plan, essentially.
So they're doing something, but they're on their own.
Yep.
And you've done a lot of work within the municipality of St. Catharines. How often does your group, Niagara DAP, meet and you discuss issues that are common with those municipalities?
Yep, I think it's probably on average about every other, so the coordinators itself, we're meeting actually every month, not through Niagara DAPS, but we're all getting together to kind of figure out where we are on our plans and to discuss this issue, as well as for the Niagara DAPS, it's probably on average every other month.
Okay, thank you.
And what's what's good about the position is that Olivia is working directly with Mark Green as well. So those of you around council know Mark Green is very involved in a lot of the climate change mitigation and what we're working on here at the city, and so she's working directly with Mark because she works for the city under, Anthony, if you want to jump in there.
Yeah, so Olivia works for EFES through Barks Group. We secured funding to be able to obtain a adaptation coordinator to help us put together our plan. The Niagara Adapts Group is actually a memorandum of understanding that the city entered into with 7 other municipalities and Brock to provide some technical support to assist us in developing the climate adaptation plan.
Okay, seeing no other further questions, Councillor Porter?
Yeah, this is kind of a big question. I'm just wondering if there's I don't know when our official plan is due. How many years away are we from a new official plan?
Director of Planning.
Through the mayor to the councillor, the city's official plan is a 25-year plan. The last time we did a brand new official plan was 2010, and we update it every 5 years or so. We're currently undergoing our current municipal comprehensive review, and that's been scoped to deal with the land needs assessment. So the employment land needs assessment, the commercial land needs assessment, and the residential land needs assessment, and that is being presented to council in Q1 2020.
Okay. I'm just curious if there's any possibility to address climate change, or if you've seen other municipalities address climate mitigation and adaptation issues in their official plan. Is that in any of the conferences you've been to?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I think typically what we see are greater initiatives around climate change, like what we've just heard from our climate change coordinator, in that they're done corporately because they include not just growth-related aspects, but operational-related aspects as well. So I think in this circumstance, it might make sense to let some of that work play out and then tie it into our planning policies at the next opportunity for review.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Porter. Any further questions? Okay, and prior to the vote, and Councillor Williamson, I think a direction would be, if it's open for you, is that at the budget meeting, if staff can highlight some of the 2020 climate mitigations, because I think it's in the budget and what we're pushing for, but we're not highlighting it. So if we can bring that out during budget night, some of the climate change initiatives, our climate mitigation strategies that we have, it's good to point out that we're actually budgeting for some of this stuff as well. Okay, Councillor Williamson moved the motion. I'll go to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
Okay, so we move on to 3.3, which is Councillor 3.3, which is the Welland Canals Parkway, Welland Wilfrid Laurier Crescent. And I'll look to Anthony Martuccio for some comments.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the report before you tonight is in response to Council's motion to review the intersection traffic control with the aim of assisting pedestrians crossing Welland Canals Parkway from Wilfrid Laurier Crescent to the pathway. You will see in the report that staff undertook an assessment of the various types of recognized traffic control, which range in both costs and complexity of installation. The process involved undertaking 2 8-hour pedestrian and vehicle volume counts. The results identified that pedestrian and vehicle volumes on Wilfrid Laurier were extremely low in comparison to that of the volumes experienced at Welland Canals Parkway. These traffic volumes were reviewed and applied to the various industry standards, and council approved warrants for each of the traffic control types. The results of the assessment indicated that none of the justifications or warrants were satisfied, except for the pedestrian PXO. However, due to operational and safety concerns, staff are not recommending any of the traffic control measures. It should also be noted that based on current funding levels for traffic signals, Staff are only able to address one intersection per year, and those funds are reserved to address existing signals that are at end of life, are in poor condition, and lack accessibility. With respect to the always stop, even though the cost for implementing this solution is relatively low in comparison to the other means of traffic control, staff are not recommending this type of traffic control as the warrants approved by council are not satisfied. Staff have concerns that the extreme imbalance in traffic volumes could lead to poor driver habits on Welland Canals Parkway, where signage is ignored and could result in greater safety concerns.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martuccio. So, Councillor Littleton, you have a motion on the floor?
That's right, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Miller, that whereas the pedestrians from the residential neighborhood on the west side of Welland Canals Parkway wishing to cross Welland Canals Parkway to or from the pathway must do so at an uncontrolled location, and whereas the installation of a pedestrian crossover is not appropriate due to operational and safety limitations, therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to install an all-way stop at the intersection of Welland Canals Parkway and Wilfrid Laurier Crescent to provide a controlled crossing for pedestrians at this location. Do you want me to speak to it now?
You can either choose to speak to it now or speak to it last. What would you choose to do? You only speak once.
I'm speaking last.
Okay, Councillor Cisco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Forgive me, maybe this is a ridiculous question, but are we able to install an all-way stop on Welland Canals Parkway? I thought that was seaway controlled.
Mr. Martuccio?
No, that is a city right away.
Okay, so we are capable of doing this.
Correct.
I feel like we've had conversations in the past about changes to Welland Canals Parkway that indicated the opposite, specifically when we were dealing with the new development to the north of Wilfrid Laurier Crescent and the desire of some of the residents to have an outlet from the new roads that were going in there. They wanted to outlet onto Welland Canals Parkway, and at the time I thought the reason that was given to us was that we couldn't do that because it was seaway controlled.
Mr. Martuccio?
That is not the understanding that I currently have, but I could look into that further and provide you with that information.
Was it the previous, kind of like last council that was the
last term of council? It was brought by, I believe both ward councillors were looking for that.
And it was not about the opportunity, it was the danger on the corner. So they did a study on the turn and the volume of speed and cars going through, it would create a blind spot. So the cars would be traveling at too quick of a distance to then stop. That's why staff had recommended against that. So it wasn't about not being able to, it was the danger of that corner. It was too close to the bend. I remember that discussion. But we can pull the report up and send it again.
Councillor Phillips and I were both under that impression. That was the reason why I asked initially, because it felt like that was the reason that was given. But okay, if we're able to do it, then I appreciate that.
Councillor Townsend?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question. Are we able to, sorry, it says always stop. I'm visualizing obviously a stop sign, but is there like a red flashing light? What type of, I guess my concern would be anyone going through a stop sign. Are we able to add any type of flashing red light below the stop sign just to make it visible for people driving?
Mr. Martuccio?
Our typical always stops do not have flashing reds. That is something that we could investigate to bring more attention to the intersection. However, it would add to the cost for the installation of an always stop. You'd have to bring power and to the location to be able to provide those services there.
Okay. And my other question would be, are the residents in favor of this? Obviously, there's been conversations with residents, I guess, to the ward councillors.
Councillor Littleton, you're moving the motion?
But if I speak now, can I speak later?
No, you're just answering the question.
Answering the question. Yes, it's a great concern. People cannot get from the community that they live in, plus the additional houses that are going to be built in their townhouse community, another couple hundred people, cannot get across Welland Canals Parkway in a safe manner.
Councillor Miller, do you want to add to that or no? Okay, if not, then I'm going to go back to the question.
No.
Okay, Councillor Townsend?
I would like to add a friendly amendment. I guess my concern here is just the visibility of being able to see the stop sign. I know the parkway is quite busy. I would hope it would be a friendly amendment to add some type of flashing.
In context, there is a stop sign at the end of Scott Street, and that's in your ward, and that doesn't have a flashing red light on it, and they stop there. It's the exact same as this one. So I understand what you're saying. It could be a temporary signage that says stop sign being installed and be aware, new stop sign, but long-term, I don't think it needs one.
Okay, so we can have like a notice of like new stop sign. That's something we can at least have.
Mr. Martuccio, a notice of stop sign coming and then having some kind of awareness program?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we could provide public notice of the new installation of a stop sign at the intersection.
Okay.
Okay, and I would be okay with that. Thank you.
I'm trying to think who had their hands up. Councillor Miller, then go to Councillor Williamson.
Just to sort of, I guess, answer Councillor Townsend's question and expand on it a bit, we've heard about this frequently and regularly since the campaign last year, and I think Councillor Littleton is probably a traffic expert by now, and maybe if she wants to switch careers, she could probably get into that by the amount of work she does around traffic in our ward, which seems to be a significant problem. And I think this has a chance. I know stop signs aren't great for speed mitigation, but we'll do a little bit, and hopefully we'll stop some of the excessive truck traffic. So I think this always stop might not be a perfect solution, but it addresses a number of concerns on the street. So I think, and it's not costly, and we always have the opportunity to review these new stop locations as we move forward. So I think this is a good compromise solution for a number of issues on Welland Canals Parkway.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Martuccio, is your staff comfortable with having this turn into an all-way stop at this location?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, staff's recommendation is for not installing an all-way stop. Given the options that were presented, pedestrian crossover and an all-way stop, staff are more comfortable with an all-way stop than putting a pedestrian crossover at this location.
In terms, is it warranted based on the statistics?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it is not warranted based on the warrants that were approved by council.
Thank you.
Councillor Swart.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Director Martuccio. I'm really in the horns of dilemma on this one because I usually like to support the staff recommendation. Should it be the will of council to have the three-way stop signs installed, is there the possibility of this being even more unsafe for motorists and perhaps, if you will, actually being a little bit more dangerous or a little bit more unsafe? Because I understand that on these thorough streets, main roads, arterial roads, the idea is to keep the traffic flow moving. And if we were to install a stop sign there, could it possibly be more unsafe?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, staff's concerns are that due to the imbalance in traffic, so 6% of the traffic at that intersection is coming from Wilfrid Laurier, and 94% of the traffic is actually on Welland Canals Parkway. So our concern is that as drivers start to realize that when they come up to the stop sign, there's no reason to stop because there's no pedestrians or vehicles, that there's the possibility that they'll gain bad habits of disobeying the stop sign altogether and driving through, which could cause more significant safety concerns at the intersection than currently exist.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to add this very quickly, and then I'm not going to say anything else, so just make my remarks. In any ward, we have a lot of major arterial roads, streets, and I've received a lot of complaints about safety crossing Vine Street, Bunning Road, Grantham. You can make an argument that almost on every street, secondary, main arterial road, it is dangerous to cross. So I think I've got to go with the staff recommendation on this one, Mr. Mayor. You know, I'm going to defer to the staff on this one because I think the concerns are not only for Wilfrid Laurier, but throughout the entire city. So thank you.
Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My thoughts are exactly the same. I thought we had delegated authority to staff for stop signs.
I'll look to the CAO. We did. The reason why it's here is because it's been lifted by, because they're Councillor. We did, and if it's contested by either the community or a councillor, then it has to come to us. That's why it's in front of us.
So any councillor can bring up the staff denial?
Yeah.
Okay, and the other question I had, I thought there are environmental reasons for delegating it to staff, that every time we have these stop signs, there's an environmental cost to it. Could staff respond?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could get maybe a little more clarification on what you mean by environmental concerns. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that that's something that I've dealt with, at least since taking on the role, but it's definitely something we could look further into.
You done, Councillor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought previously that our staff did express that as a concern. I look forward to the new director's approach. Thank you.
Councillor Harris?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Transportation. When you're answering Councillor Sorrento's questions, you're mentioning about, you know, it might encourage bad behavior and stuff. Is that not something that the police should actually be enforcing? So perhaps part of this motion, when we put in a stop sign, we could actually request the NRP to monitor it for the first little bit.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're correct. Disobeying stop signs would become an enforcement issue. However, staff would still get complaints with regards to traffic issues at the intersection, but we could definitely reach out to the NRP and notify them of the always stop that was installed at the intersection.
Maybe as an amendment to this, not only like notifying the residents that that's going to be installed leading up to the stop sign, but also to notify the NRP and perhaps they can monitor at first. Does that make sense?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we could reach out to the NRP.
Okay, and I guess my other question is, does staff, have we had, okay. This isn't really a new issue. I seem to recall previous councils talked about this a lot. Can you give us like just a little bit of a background? Like I believe Jenny Stevens brought it up quite a bit, and we fought for these type of things over and over again, and staff continually deny it. Can you just comment on it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, when we get these types of requests, we normally go out to the intersection to do a traffic analysis to determine the amount of traffic that's in the intersection to see whether or not it meets the guidelines that were approved for the installation of stop signs. That's generally the driving factor behind the decisions that staff are recommending.
Can I, through the mayor to the director of engineering, when you establish these guidelines and when you go out and monitor it, do you actually select certain times? I guess I'm going back to a few years ago, Councillor Kushner and I encountered when we wanted to get rid of a crossing guard on Glendale, even though it was a crossing guard for a school. And I guess when staff went out there, they noticed that there weren't that many cars, but they weren't actually monitoring it during the summer. So I'm just wondering, do you guys go out during certain times, like peak times, certain times?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we typically use best practices in doing analysis of traffic at intersections. For this one, we went once during the week for an 8-hour session, and we also go out once during the weekend on fair weather days where we would expect increased traffic flow on the street in order to carry out these analyses.
Okay, and just one more question. I'm just wondering, how much weight do we actually put on, like I guess we have all this criteria, but how much weight do we actually put on the councillors' opinion, because they're the ones that actually field all the calls? Is there any sort of weighting that goes to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, the recommendations from staff are based solely on best practices for traffic.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Councillor Dodge?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For clarity, what the councillors are asking for is a safe way for them to cross from Wilfrid Laurier across the parkway to get to the path along Welland Canals Parkway?
That's correct. So what's happening is people from Mackenzie King, Wilfrid Laurier, where's my other street name? There's Howland, there's a new street coming in, McNaughton, and Alex Grant Place. All of those people, so they can cross safely, correct?
Okay. Thank you. When I'm reading through the report, maybe I missed it, but when you're showing the traffic counts, it's showing the traffic count, and it says that a requirement is an average of 90 vehicles an hour for 720. And you're showing the traffic count for Wilfrid Laurier Crescent, but you don't show anything for the Welland Canals Parkway. So I just don't know whether I'm missing it somewhere in this report, or if you can give me those numbers for that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have the counts for Welland Canals Parkway. They aren't included in the report, and actually, I must apologize, I don't have them with me today. But the counts that we show for Wilfrid Laurier are, it's to demonstrate that it doesn't meet the minimum thresholds that are required on Wilfrid Laurier in order for us to install those types of traffic controls.
Okay, but just what I'm understanding from the councillor is it's not Wilfrid Laurier that they're more concerned about crossing. And I think there would be a stop sign there already. What they're more concerned about is crossing the Canal Parkway, and you're not showing any of the counts for that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I could provide some further counts that we did. So in the 8-hour count that we did for the intersection, there were approximately 334 vehicles on Wilfrid Laurier in comparison to Welland Canals Parkway, where there were approximately 5,700 vehicles that went down the street. There was also only 29 pedestrian crossings at that street.
Okay, so there was 5,700 cars that went by in an hour? Is that what you, or is that per day?
During an 8-hour count.
Okay. I would think that maybe that might be the reason that there's such a low count of pedestrians. They're probably afraid to go across that street. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Phillips. Thank you, Councillor Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The concern I have is based on what I hear from the residents who live in the Scott Street area. I've had complaints numerous times about the fact that drivers regard those stop signs as stoptional. They're rolling the stop signs, or they're going through all the time, and it was creating a dangerous situation for them because they thought it was going to be a safe crossing because there was a stop sign there, and the car kept going. And that's what I'm having a real hard time with this one as Councillor Sorrento, because I don't want to create a situation where they think they can cross and all of a sudden, with that number of cars, somebody's going to miss a stop sign. I could see perhaps putting a painted lines going across and with signs indicating pedestrians crossing or something like that, but a stop sign does not definitely guarantee safety on a busy, and I'm up and down that road a lot, and cars are not traveling at necessarily the assigned speeds. I'm really, really concerned about putting that. And as far as asking the NRP to be there, I've requested the NRP to be at Scott Street numerous times. Maybe they were, but they're not going to be there every day, planted at a crosswalk on the Welland Canal Parkway.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Okay, before Councillor Littleton speaks, the wise guys did put a Councillor Miller. Councillor Porter, okay.
Thanks. I just want clarification. This is only for pedestrians. The residents don't have trouble turning left or right in their cars on here. It's just for, because I'm looking at Welland Canals Parkway, which isn't really pedestrian friendly. It's like a thoroughfare. So the street's not designed for, it's essentially designed for speed. There's nothing else here that would kind of cause you or want you to slow down. So I am echoing Councillor Sorrento's concerns. I'm concerned about putting an all-way stop. I know I would be in favor of something else, pedestrian crossing with some kind of signage, but that way the pedestrians know there's no guarantee of a stop, so the pedestrians would have to be extra cautious. and not assuming that the car is going to stop for them. So I would sort of be in favor of that. I'm not going to support the stop signs, just because I don't think it's the safest option right now.
Okay,
Just a point of clarification, just quickly. So I know earlier we had said that at the end of Scott Street that there are no lights, but they do have the flashing red lights. And looking at this intersection, I am concerned that it is a big intersection, and I do think, Mr. Mayor, would need some type of lights to draw attention to any drivers on the road.
So we'll have the staff look into it. Okay, so Councillor Littleton, before Councillor Littleton speaks, we did open a new park there last year, and it was the Wise Guys Park. They generously donated a significant amount of money. It's about 15 feet away from that intersection. I think it'd be irresponsible for us not to put up a four-way stop, because if any kids decide that they want to go in that direction and then they haven't been obviously maybe trained, it's very close to that, and I think we should be doing everything we can to slow traffic. If we talk about Vision Zero, which is putting the pedestrian and the cyclist first, we got to get people to slow down more, and we got to get people to realize that these are also subdivisions that are being created, and there is a very good, well-used park 15 feet away from all that 1,500 cars driving up and down. So it's incumbent upon us to create a safe space for that park as well. If not, we shouldn't have put the park there in the first place. Councillor Littleton, your final remarks.
Thank you. Next time I'm speaking first. Okay. So I want to address some of the things that have been brought up, because I did not bring this willy-nilly. I met with staff twice before this has come before you, and we've had conversations. That's why the language is the way it is in the recommendation. Staff has said the installation, the pedestrian crossover, which is similar to the one that's on Vine Street, is not appropriate. I'll tell you why. People are going to come across that. They're going to come down the street. This is what staff was saying. They may not see it. The things are flashing. Everybody's, as soon as you hit that, they're going to go, right? With a stop, we know as pedestrians, we do wait to see if people are actually going to stop. When you push a button like the one outside the pack, you push and you go. It's not the same pedestrian behavior. So that's why that is mentioned like that. A couple of things that need to be really, I think we need to talk about it just logically. When we're talking about people are going to roll through stops, they're going to do it everywhere, folks. Everywhere at every stop sign. This is making this intersection, just to echo what the mayor said, more safe. It's making it safer. Right now, what you have is a situation, as Councillor Porter alluded to, you have a straightway. There are no sidewalks on the side of these. So if someone's thinking, well, why can't they just walk up to the little one where you push the button outside of Rockwood? There's nowhere for them to walk. As the mayor said, we've built a park here on the west side. Actually, on the other side of Welland Canals Parkway is another playground on the other side where the museum is. So you have all these people that are here. You have this straightaway. The stop sign also creates a speed reduction. You have all the signs coming up. People will learn that they have to stop, just like they have to stop at Scott, just like they have to stop further down Welland Canals. It becomes a behavior, and it will slow that speed down. Right now, everybody's foot is at 60 to 65. It's a 50 zone. That's anecdotal all the time. So that, I don't buy that people are going to blow through it. It's going to make it less safe than it is now. Right now, your option is to look both ways and run as fast as you can across there, and everybody's going, like I just told you, between 60 and 70. If we do have the stop sign, then yes, there's a possibility that someone's going to blow through a stop sign, just like they're going to do it at every other part of the city. So I want everybody to think about that. The director is talking about best practices. When they're talking about that it doesn't meet their standard for the all-way stop, 100% it doesn't, because of the discrepancy, as he's mentioned, in the two streets. Wilfrid Laurier only has 300 and whatever it is over the 8-hour period. Welland Canals Parkway, as you just heard, has 6,000 vehicles. We need to make this intersection safer. We are creating walkable cities. You look at the picture here, right on the other side of this is a trail that people can get on. They can bike there, they can walk, they can take their families, they can take their strollers, and then the museum is right there, like I just told you. That is creating a walkable city where there isn't currently a sidewalk to go down Welland Canals Parkway. So I want you to all think about that. the question about turning left, yes, it is a little bit difficult, but that wasn't the #1 driver for me asking for the staff report. So I really hope that you will allow for this to go through. We can always look at it again in 6 months. I don't know why no one's listening. why we can look at it again in 6 months if it'll make you feel better. We could re-examine it. I'm happy to do that. But not doing anything at this point in time where we know when we say, why were we talking about it 8 years ago, or now we have all these new houses in here, and we have a whole other bunch of townhouses that are going to bring 100, 200 more residents in the next, say, whatever, 5 years. It's incumbent upon us to do it now. I'm asking for your support. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Okay, I'll call a question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
No.
Councillor Porter.
No.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento.
No.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
No.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's carried.
Okay, folks, we head on into Financial Management 3.4, and Christine Douglas, Director of Financial Management, you have some opening remarks?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, under the Municipal Act, Council adoption of the budget is required. Council approved the City's 2020 capital budget at its meeting of October 7th, 2019, with the exception of 2 items. These 2 items are being discussed this evening. The one was the City's website upgrade project, and the second is the Transit Commission capital portion of the 2020 fleet budget. Both of these items have been included in the draft 2020 capital budget that was presented to Council on October the 7th of this year. At that meeting, Council referred these items to staff for additional information. The Budget Standing Committee reviewed the additional information related to these 2 capital items. Council has been provided with the links to the Budget Standing Committee reports, memos, and correspondence items, and these 2 items are now returning to Council this evening for your consideration as part of the City's 2020 capital budget.
Okay, Councillor Sorrento, you had a question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, is anybody else going to speak? Any of our staff?
No, from staff? No, they're good.
Okay. All right, just a few questions, Mr. Mayor, through you to any one of our staff. So I've received a few phone calls, and some of the residents are looking at the total amount of money, this $400,000. So, you know, in today's world of technology, where there are a lot of free apps and a lot of stuff that's for free, can you just explain for the public as to why our upside limit is $400,000? Any one of our staff?
Okay, I'll put it over to Maggie.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So when we were looking at the website, we recognized that there's a base amount that you'd have to consider. So that base amount was developed by having conversations with our current provider, looking at other municipalities who've been updating their websites, as well as conversations with our IT staff. So when we're talking about 400,000, the 200,000 allows us to get an update of essentially what we have now. And to further explain that, what we have now is a website that doesn't allow a lot of online functionality. So there are a lot of additional services that we'd like to add to improve customer service. We'd also like the opportunity to integrate with city software, because right now our website doesn't really speak to the city software, so that creates problems in processes. So that's where we kind of have developed that upper limit of the 400,000.
And Mr. Mayor, these are the reasons as to why it's going to cost so much money?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. To any one of our staff, how old is our current website?
Maggie?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor, our current website is about 15 years old, and we haven't made any further investments in our website. In 2014, we did an additional $8,000 worth of work on our website to make it accessible at the time.
So we'd call that version 1.0.
So then clearly our website is incredibly dated. If you can just ask some technical questions, Mr. Mayor, to our Director of IT. Mr. Director Gardner, can you tell us what back office programs are and the accessibility components of this new website, and perhaps what their cost is?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, there is accessibility regulations. The current website does not meet those regulations, so we want to obviously develop a new website that will meet them. Secondly, there are a number of, as Ernst & Young reported earlier, we need an IT system modernization plan. Right now, we have no integration to our Amanda systems or our class system that does parks and recreations. There is a number of systems we would like to integrate into the web to allow citizens to do online transactions instead of having to report into the City Hall.
And one final question, Mr. Mayor, to any one of our staff. So if it is the will of this council to approve this new infrastructure system, if you will this allow us to build on it moving forward? Thank you.
Councillor Garcia.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the staff, I have a similar concern to Councillor Sorrento. I'm just concerned about the cost, like based on what I hear elsewhere, that updating a website costs. I totally agree that our website is horrible in terms of navigation. It's very difficult to navigate. But $400,000 is a lot of money. So I'd like to put our new director on the spot and ask him, even though he just joined us, does this seem reasonable to you, $400,000 for this? Because it seems like a lot to me.
Okay, I'll first go to Director of Financial Management, and then we'll jump over to the CIO officer.
Thank you, through your worship. I think for some context for council, with regards to the original website that was designed and developed in 2005, that total cost was at a cost of $250,000 to the municipality. So therefore, looking at a cost of $400,000 this year to review our website for accessibility and to create some improvements with regards to the website, I would say, in my opinion, I think that upper limit of $400,000 is a reasonable costing.
So, Mr. Gardner, you want to add anything to that?
The integration, it will be up to $400,000. It depends on how many systems we want to integrate. We will study that as part of this whole project. So that number may come in lower, or it may come in depending on what we want to deliver to the citizens.
Thank you. Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, with all due respect to the Director of Financial Management, I don't think comparing it to what it cost before is necessarily a good rationale, because maybe we grossly overpaid before. But anyway, is this going to be based on actual quotes, or do we have any actual quotes at this time?
That's why it's an upset limit. They'll have to go to RFP. They can't sole source. So they have to go for quotes. Yes, they do.
Okay, so that will come back to council?
Doesn't come back to council if it's under 400,000, no.
No. Okay.
That's why we're setting the upset limit.
Okay. Okay.
Councilor Miller.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that, having worked in building websites and digital marketing, that the $400,000, I think if you talk to most businesses locally, is a reasonable number for the amount, the sheer size of this website and the amount of things we do with it and want it to be able to do. And I don't think it's really incumbent on this council, with no offense to any of my colleagues, to really nitpick that number at that point. That's the number we're getting from staff. I think it's been under a lot of scrutiny. It's been in the press and things like that, and they haven't backed off or budged on that number. So I think we have to trust that that is the number. I just have a question about how this will happen if approved. That RFP that we send out, what is the timeline that we're looking at in terms of having this?
Okay, Maggie.
At this point, we're still in the really early stages. We just have been meeting with the staff team members to kind of set out the project schedule. So we haven't really set any specific timelines yet with that. Because there's also a number of other IT projects happening at the same time, we are a little bit tight on time as far as trying to be able to get those activities all done around the same time.
Okay, thank you. And I guess through you, the mayor, I have a feeling I know the answer to this question, but we have a number of wonderful IT and website design companies locally here in Niagara. It's sort of a burgeoning industry here. Is there any way through our RFP process to give consideration to those companies that are creating jobs and things like that in Niagara?
Christine?
Through you, Your Worship, with regards to local vendors that can supply this product, I would recommend that they register on our bids and tenders website, and then they would get notified when these RFP documents get issued. We're not permitted under our procurement bylaw for a local preference.
Thank you for that, and I'd be remiss not to mention this. I am the youngest member of council, and I think it really is important as we move the city forward to ensure that we are online and that our presence is easy to navigate and we are able to accomplish the goals of the city.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Okay, seeing Councillor Porter.
Thanks very much. I'm going to support this. I look forward to a new website. I do think it's at a date and it's in line with where we're going. And as the auditors from Ernst & Young pointed out, our staff is lean and they can't build it themselves. Those were some of the comments that I received, like can't just existing staff build the website themselves. I don't think they have the capacity there. We've heard from the previous director of IT that there's always managing IT risks all the time. There's always viruses coming in, and there's new projects, and there's a lot that they have to keep going with kind of a bare bones staff. So we do have to hire externally for this project. I'm just wondering if there will be citizen engagement through this process, like focus groups, like is that being built into the project?
Part of the process will include a public consultation. So what we intend to do is have meetings with senior staff, as well as the accessibility committee and the public. So we've already started an online survey, essentially a communication survey, which does ask some questions specific to our website. So we are getting some information in on that aspect. But once we start the actual process of doing essentially an audit of what we have now, that will include quite a bit of public consultation.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Porter. Seeing no other further questions, I'll call it.
Can I ask that we vote on them separately, Mr. Mayor?
Of course you can. Okay, so we'll vote first on the website upgrade. To the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor?
You can just guess.
Councillor Dodge? Yes. Councillor Garcia?
No.
Councillor Harris? Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Littleton?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Cisco?
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento?
A hearty yes.
Councillor Townsend?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik?
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, so the second part of the motion.
And it's, which one? This. Councillor Cisco?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips? Yes. Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Littleton?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner? Yes. Councillor Harris? Yes. Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento?
Yes, heartily.
Councillor Townsend?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik?
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
All right. 3.5, looking forward to a new website, by the way, coming in. Maybe you can ask Greg for Councillor Miller for some guidance. He's probably on website 4.1 or something now that he's the youngest. Okay.
Sorry, point of order.
This is where
Mr.
you're
Mayor.
on. Yep. Councillor Townsend, so after that long commercial, it's over to you.
All right, surprise, surprise, you can probably guess. In reference to 11.2, I'm asking council to appoint those, the four that have put their names forth, to have them split the year term, doing 3 months consecutively as deputy mayor, and I'm hoping council will support that. I think it's, in all fairness, we have 4 outstanding candidates that have put their name forth, and I think that in all fairness, they would each do a very good job representing as deputy mayor.
Okay, it's right there. So Councillor Townsend, you'll be moving that motion. And you'll be asking for an amendment. So essentially what you're asking for is for 2020 to be equal appointments for those that are interested, and then for 2021, it's by month.
Correct.
Okay.
Through 20.
By month in 2021. So we don't go through this again, it's just everyone's assigned a month, and if you don't want it, you can pass it on to someone else. Councillor Cisco.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to ask that with respect to the third clause there about equal appointments, that some sort of policy come forward from staff. I know for some of us, given our work schedules, there are some months of the year that may be applicable, but other months that wouldn't. So if staff could put together some policy based on best practices in other communities.
So that'll come back, that'd be great, come back for 2021.
Thank you.
Councillor Garcia, will you take that as direction to staff?
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to ask a procedural question from the clerk. We got an email from the clerk a couple of days ago pointing out that to pull items from consent, the procedural bylaw says we have to do it by Friday. I didn't see any of these motions, I don't think, until Saturday. I don't know when they got
I'll look
on,
to the
but
clerk.
what's the deadline for a motion? Because I didn't see.
So I'll ask the clerk, because
Yeah,
the
well,
motion was
that's what I'm
submitted.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this motion was submitted. It
When was
there.
it published?
The published? Friday morning.
And what is the deadline for a motion?
The motion was, the deadlines are Wednesday at 3:30. We published Friday.
So it was published in
You
accordance
have
with the
to
bylaws.
give it to, yeah.
So I'm sorry, so you did get it by Wednesday? Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may, if we do this, we need to pass a motion to suspend your procedural rules, and that's where I thought Councillor Garcia was leading, because your procedural rule right now says you appoint one deputy mayor annually, so we'll have to do a suspension of the rules.
Councillor Cisco, motion to suspend the rules, all in favor? Carried.
Can I just say something?
We're just going to take a time out, and CAO, if you can just direct what you're talking about.
Evan, can you, or sorry, oh my gosh, Kyra, what does the 5 months in 2021 refer to? Okay. So it's splitting the year of 2020? Yes. And then monthly in 2021?
Thank you to the CAO, just paying attention. I think it's good, because clearly I wasn't. So it's a compliment. Councillor Littleton?
Yeah, thanks. Can we separate out I'm sorry to everybody, I'm going to apologize, but I'm declaring a conflict on this changing the procedural to the whatever.
For
the
2020.
Second, I'm sorry. I'm out on that, on a conflict, but I'd like to vote on the other part of this motion. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Porter?
I'm hoping this can be a friendly amendment. I prefer the idea of continuing this on a quarterly basis rather than monthly. I just think sometimes we wouldn't be able to get our feet wet in the job. I think it would be too confusing to do it on a monthly basis. And I think there are some people who just won't ever want to do it. So I think quarterly gives us the opportunity over the rest of the term to give people a chance, and I think it's easier to manage.
And I would accept that as friendly, yeah.
Okay. So you're going quarterly moving forward, so we have to go through this whole thing again where people put up their hands every month or every four, like really? Like this is where you want to go with this? Come on, folks.
Well, so can I just, the way I guess the vision would look like is next December, those who are interested would put their names forth, and it would be divided up if there's, say, 3 or 4 councillors for the year.
Okay, so, and if you don't get, okay.
Could I hear how it would work monthly then? Like, how would it be any different?
There's 12 councillors, so every councillor would be assigned a month, so you wouldn't have to jockey for which months you want to do it, which months you don't want to do it, and all that other stuff associated with it.
I just wonder if there are councillors who actually want to do it. Does everybody want to be a deputy mayor? Is that?
Just makes it simple. Councillor Harris, you haven't spoken yet?
I was just wondering, would it not make sense just to do it for this year and then implement like an actual strategy for 2021 with an actual process? Is that not, so just stick with the original 4 names or whatever, or 3 names or 2 names or whoever F wants to do it?
Okay, then I guess you can ask for an
I don't know,
amendment to
like I
report
just,
back.
because it seems like are we going to be able to agree with anything?
Well, the simplest one is, okay, whatever. Councillor Miller, you haven't spoken yet?
I guess my struggle is if we're saying the monthly plan is the best plan, which is essentially what we're saying here, why wouldn't we just go to that right away? Why would we wait a year? And I understand the 4 councillors put their name forward, but they also put their name forward when the job was very different than it's being described here. I think myself, and I'm sure others would have done it if we knew we were signing up for a 2-month period at some point and put our names forward. So while I guess I'm sympathetic to the 4 people who wanted to put their names forward for the next year, that's also not even what we're potentially voting on here. So I guess I would just ask that why wouldn't we just start the monthly plan in January 2020 and not go through this whole hullabaloo?
So if you didn't want to be deputy, you would just pass it to another councillor.
Perfect, that works. Change it back to monthly, and if so, to clarify, if someone doesn't want to be deputy mayor, they can give their month up, correct?
Correct.
Done.
This is
I'm
great.
confused about the second clause says therefore that they be appointed for 3 months beginning in January 2020, but then it says further be resolved that the deputy mayor for 2020 continue their duties through December 2020.
It's because our bylaw stops December 1st, right now. It should be 2019.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, due to the election, you were actually inaugurated December 1, so that's when the deputy mayor was first done. What we're hoping to do is begin January 1, so we are asking this deputy mayor to continue December until January 1 to get it.
But it says a deputy mayor for 2020, so is there one deputy mayor for 2020 or there's something?
The present deputy mayor, which is Councillor Harris, continue his duties through December so that we begin the process January, so we're on a regular January to December 31, so that we could do it 1 month at a time.
What Councillor Garcia is pointing out is that it should be 2019. Yeah.
So sorry, Councillor. It should be 2019.
There you go. There you go. And the appointments begin January 2020.
And it should say 3 months consecutively.
Councillor Williamson.
I would suggest we just worry about this year, because that's how we've done appointments in the past for deputy mayors just this year. Let's do it quarterly for this year, and then we can figure out what we're going to do going forward for 2021.
Okay. I would agree with you, Councillor Williamson. It's just that what's been experienced over the last 3 weeks is quite frustrating when council should be paying attention to the stuff in front of us, and there's phone calls about, I want to be deputy mayor, I want to be deputy mayor. If we can cut that off now and just have a process that's...
True, but you might get the same 4 people may want to do it again next year, and it might work out fairly.
Okay. Councillor Kushner.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can't agree to this. We have what I thought as coming for an election, and we're abdicating that responsibility. If the position was not important, I'd say fine, but I think it is an important position, and I think there's a learning curve. And I would ask to a former deputy mayor, maybe 2, is there a learning curve for the job? Yes.
I think there is a learning curve, and I think it's a responsibility not to be taken lightly, and I look at it as the opportunity to represent council and be almost the conduit for council to the mayor and senior staff. So there is a learning curve. Not curb, because I was thinking curbs, but
It's
curb.
longer than a month, I assume.
Yes.
And to Councillor Phillips.
I agree with Councillor Harris. Yes, there is a learning curve. I saw the role of deputy mayor in, number one, because I'm retired, I was able to attend the senior management team meetings on Wednesday and answer questions and help develop agenda, which I found to be very important. I don't know if Councillor Harris was able to do that. That's one, to me, significant role. Secondly, any concerns from councillors that they wanted taken to the mayor, I was able to do that, or if he wanted me to take something to specific councillors, I was able to do that. And plus, Saturdays are busy because the mayor is always double booked because he's out everywhere opening businesses, and you usually get the call to do, I'm going to say 2-3 businesses most Saturdays. So that's the role. Yes, there is a learning curve. To be there for a month, I don't know. It depends on the availability of the person who's going to be deputy mayor and the involvement he or she want to become involved in.
Okay, just to put it in context, at the region, it is by month. So, and the region, you'd think the regional chair would have a very important vice chair that would do all the work of what a vice chair would do, but it's by month, it's not by year. So I think a bigger corporation, you'd think there would be a vice chair, but there's not. Councillor?
Just to add to what you said, I spoke with Councillor Height about it, and he's been deputy mayor on this council as well as running being the deputy mayor of the month, or deputy chair of the month of the region, and he says it does work up there. But then again, there's things that work up there that don't work down here, and vice versa.
If I can continue, Mr. Mayor, you indicated it works for the region. Well, I would have some question about how well it worked for the last term of the region. But my point is, I have not heard a good argument. I've not heard a good argument for why we would be doing this, with the exception that we have 4 good people that are interested, and therefore that's the reason to make them deputy mayor on a short basis. If we have 4 excellent people, let this council decide who is the most excellent of the 4. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else willing to speak? Councillor Porter?
I have a good reason, I think. If I can respond to Councillor Kushner's comments, I think it would be important to have different people. You have new councillors, experienced councillors. You get to spend additional time with senior staff and with the mayor setting the agenda, and I think it just builds for a better team. So that's why I would be in favor of taking turns doing it, is you get that opportunity to kind of be on the inside a little bit, and you gain a greater appreciation of what staff are doing.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Sorrento?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not a conflict for me to speak to this, is it?
I'm not a judge of conflict.
Okay, so I'm with the greatest respect to my colleague, and I'll ask her later on. I just don't understand why Councillor Littleton declared a conflict, and I'll ask her. I do agree with this, and just to get to the comment about the learning curve, the one thing that I heard that stands out is that selecting the agendas. Most of us have represented you, Mr. Mayor, and we have represented council, so I don't know, when you talk about a learning curve, how much more of a learning curve there is involved other than picking up the items for the agenda. We read the agendas every other week or when they come to us, so I don't see that as a tremendously onerous learning curve, if you will, Mr. Mayor. And I quite agree with some of my colleagues that I think that we should rotate it quarterly, Mr. Mayor, because it will allow other people to represent your office. So if Councillor Miller or Councillor Porter is interested in doing it, and there are 4 of us right now, that would allow everybody a fair opportunity. And I think 3 months is long enough to do it. And then if there is another councillor who doesn't want to do it, and they say, okay, let's take this to council, I'm going to withdraw my name. So someone who hasn't done it, okay, for this term, then go ahead and do it. And I think that that would be very democratic, and I'm sure that my colleague from Port Dalhousie would appreciate that democratic principle. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, okay. Okay, so are we good here? So Councillor Townsend, the motion is in front of you. You've made the motion. You've heard from council. Do you want to remove the 2021, which is 1 month for each councillor in 2021, and come back to this kind of wonderful discussion that we just had in a year from now?
Leave it the way it is, and let's vote on it the way it is.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Councillor Townsend. So call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, is this the motion with the BIA as well on it?
The BIA one is not in here.
Separate
This
now?
is just a separate.
Okay. So the motion before you, Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Sorry, point of order. Didn't Councillor Wilson ask to vote separately on paragraph 2?
Did she ask that when she did? She did, didn't she?
did she ask for that? I'm sorry, I just heard her say she had a conflict.
What does Councillor Littleton have a conflict on?
She's declaring a conflict on the position of deputy mayor because it's a paid position.
In its entirety, though? I wasn't sure if she was separating out a portion of the
So I
motion
think-
so she could vote on a portion of it.
That's what we're going to get
Okay, I just want to
clarification.
make sure that we're clarifying that.
Split it, Councillor Williamson? Councillor Williamson, split? Split? Okay. Move on. I don't know if we'll have such a robust discussion for the Downtown Association, but who would like to be a member of the Downtown Association? Is there anyone who would like to put their hand up? Because currently we have a vacant space. Councillor Sorrento.
Mr. Mayor, I have to defer for a year, okay? Just so you know.
Then don't put your hand up. Then don't put your hand up. You can't
Yeah, but I'd
defer
like to
for a
speak
year.
that, okay. For my position, for my nomination, I'll do it next year if it's the will of council.
Yes. Okay. So voting on the first one?
So Councillor Williamson, you said yes. Councillor Townsend, you said yes. Councillor Sorrento,
So we're voting on the first part, which is
the motion that was up on the,
Okay,
Quarterly,
Kyra,
isn't
we got to
it?
get it up. We're doing the quarterly one,
okay.
just where you've declared a conflict.
Yes, clerk.
Councillor Cisco. Yes. Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips. Yes. Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Conflict.
Councillor Kushner. No. Councillor Harris.
I had my hand up. I'd like to remove my name. Well, I had my hand up. You guys kept switching back and forth between different things.
Just strike his name.
Okay. 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 You can still vote. Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Councillor Garcia
No.
and Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Mayor Senzik,
Yes.
and that's carried.
Okay, the second one. So highlight the second one, Kyra, if you can. Which is the, no, we're still on the first, we're still on that one, but it was split. The motion was split. So go back to the screen, and you got to highlight the second part that we're voting on, which is that it's for the next year. So it's, so all the way up, right there. So we're voting on, if you got to highlight that. And the remainder. Okay.
Is council clear? Okay. Councillor Dodge.
No.
Councillor Garcia.
No.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner. No. Councillor Littleton.
Yes?
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips. Yes. Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco. Yes. Councillor Sorrento.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
No.
And Mayor Sendzik?
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay. Whew, that was a tough one, folks. Congratulations to this year's deputy mayors, and look forward to the calendar of deputy mayors next year. That'll be a nice one. Okay, so we got to do the Downtown Association. Councillor Dodge?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. So how is it going to work for the monthly thing? Like, are we going
So
to have a
staff
procedure?
direction is to report back on how it's going to be
Oh,
selected.
I didn't see that. I'm sorry.
So staff direction from Councillor Cisco. Okay, and then Downtown Association, Councillor Kushner, you'd like to put your name forward?
No.
Okay, all in favor of Councillor Kushner on Downtown Association? He's on, yeah!
No.
That's what happens when you put your hand up.
Mr. Mayor, you have to be innovative. Since nobody's interested and we have 4 deputy mayors, why not 3? Why not have one of them on the Downtown Association?
Because they have to put
Already.
their hand up.
Should I read my speech for deputy mayor so I can get on the downtown? Would you like to hear it? It's a very good speech. I'm very good at speaking.
Just switch out. Okay, so who wants to put their name forward? Councillor Sorrento, are you going to put your name forward for
I'll
Downtown
put my name
Association?
forward.
Okay.
Just
Okay. Okay. Councillor Sorrento, no, seeing nobody else? All in favor of Councillor Sorrento on Downtown Association? Carried. Sold. To the highest bidder. No, I don't think, Councillor Littleton, you didn't put your name forward, did you? Oh, I thought you were going to read a speech. We're moving on. So now where do we go from here? In camera? So 3.6, that was already referred. That was already referred by Councillor Porter. That's the Audit and Accountability Fund, correct? That's already been referred to the Budget Committee. So now we go in camera. There's a Human Resources matter, Fire Services, Personnel matter about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employee. Can I have a mover and a seconder to go in camera? Councillor.
So what happens to 3 points, the original what we were voting? Does somebody have to strike that?
Which one is what?
The original agenda item where we were going to vote for deputy mayor under the old rules. Do we have to make some sort of motion to remove that from the agenda now?
So
What you, is, through you, Mr. Mayor, it was just a recommendation. What you did was a new motion was put, so the original was never put.
Thanks for the clarification. Okay, motion to go to camera, Councillor Phillips. Pardon? It's later. That's after we come out of in camera. Councillor Dodge, all in favor? Carried. See you in camera.